She's cheating on you, and you know it, Jane said as she placed my coffee next to my loaded fries and adjusted her apron, waiting for my response. The background noise of the diner seemed to fade away. I looked up from my phone and met her large blue eyes staring directly at me. How can you be so sure? She shrugged, scrunching her elf-like nose. Call it women's intuition, but it takes one to know one. Her raspy voice wasn't laced with pity, regret, or nostalgia about her own history of infidelity. Jane had never really apologized for cheating on me, but there was no malice in her voice either. That, perhaps, was the most unsettling part. She wasn't trying to sabotage my marriage or hurt Ashley, my wife. Worse, I wasn't even surprised by her revelation. I had sensed it, a feeling that started faintly but had grown clearer, that Ashley's recent business trips were more than just work. I've seen you here with her, and I can feel it. I know it's none of my business, but I don't want to see you get hurt again, gee. A wry smile crept across my lips. I know, it's a bit hypocritical coming from me, given I've got the morals of a stray cat, she said with surprising cheerfulness. You wouldn't say. Yes, you would. You did say that. Those were your exact words, right before you threw Norman out the window. Jane smiled. Well, that was true, now that I thought about it. I had said that. I feel bad about it. About what you said, she seemed almost offended, not about throwing Norman out the window. I forgot we were on the second floor. She wiped her forehead with mock relief, tossing her short, choppy blonde hair back. Good thing, huh? I wouldn't want you chickening out now. Besides, what you said was true. It still is. I enjoy messing around. I probably should have thought of that before proposing. Jane was never the settling down type, but youthful ignorance had blinded me to that fact. Norman had paid the price for us figuring that out, or rather, for me finding him in my bed with my supposedly exclusive girlfriend, oblivious to any commitments she had with me. Norman had charged at me the moment I entered the room. A brief conversation could have spared him 2 broken arms and a fractured nose. I managed to escape by convincing everyone I thought he was attacking my girlfriend, though I doubted anyone really believed that. They probably just wanted the chaos to end. When things start resembling a Jerry Springer episode, officials usually want it gone quickly. Yeah, it would have been a mess. And if we'd moved to a higher floor, poor Norman, I nodded, chuckling at the memory of Jane's shocked face as we looked out the window. Yeah, he didn't deserve that, I said. Once Norman understood the situation, his memory had become conveniently blurry, much to the prosecutor's dismay. Surprisingly, Norman had since become one of my closest friends, far beyond his awkward attempt to flee that night. Well, I've got to get back to my other customers, Jane said, breaking the moment. You're sure? I asked, my voice low and serious. She glanced briefly at her feet. Yeah, I mean, I don't have proof, but I can feel it. But why would I trust you? You've got nothing to gain from this. She frowned, pretending to think it over. Maybe it's because you trust me. I'm alone with your food all the time. So that's why it always tastes like cinnamon, I quipped. I'd teased Jane for years about her love of cinnamon gum. She started to respond with something witty, but her expression shifted to one of sympathy. You don't seem surprised. Something's been off for a while. Even when she's home, she's not really there. Are you two fighting? No. We're barely talking, actually. That's worse, you know. Jane's advice on relationships was unconventional, but talking to her was always easy, even if she didn't always follow her own advice. She leaves her wedding rings at home when she travels. I've found them in her jewelry box the last 2 times at least. Jane's eyes widened. Well, damn, that's probably not good. That's what I thought. I should ask Norman to look into it. He's into that detective stuff. He's an insurance investigator, Jane, not a cop. She pursed her lips. Close enough. He even has some sort of private investigator license. He knows how to look things up, and you don't. Norman had access to all kinds of databases and could track things. It was really his specialty. I'll swing by Norman's place later. Maybe you're right. She gave me a twisted smile. I usually am. But when I'm wrong, I'm really wrong. Norman looked up from his desk when I arrived. How sure are you? He asked. I don't know. I'm no expert on this. He raised an eyebrow. I figured you'd have some idea. I mean, this isn't the first time. Yeah, well, at least I'm getting sympathy, I chuckled. Hey, I'll help you however I can. At least I won't be the one going out a window this time. Jesus, how many times do I have to say I'm sorry about that? Norman smiled. I'll let you know when it's enough. I handed him the folder with Ashley's schedules from the last 6 months, her upcoming plans, phone records, and credit card statements. You're all in on this, huh? Not entirely. Her company card is off limits. I won't risk my license for that. But don't worry. If something's there, I'll probably find it. Most people aren't as clever as they think. He flipped through the papers. You know this won't fix things, right? Yeah, I know. And it won't matter in divorce court, either. I just want to be sure. I hope I'm wrong. I don't want to blow this up without proof. But if I confront her and I'm wrong, we're probably headed for divorce anyway. Think you can fix this? It depends on what's really going on. If she's done with us, maybe I am too. I could be misinterpreting everything, and she's just dealing with stuff she can't talk about. Norman shrugged, and I could tell he wasn't hopeful. Yeah, well, I'll look into it. Give me a few days. If she's struggling, I want to help her. Maybe it's just work stress. Have you tried talking to her? She barely talks to me. When I try, she just changes the subject and suddenly has something to do. That's not a good sign. How long has it been like this? I'm not sure. It started slowly, but it's been at least a year, maybe a year and a half. Did something happen around then? The only thing that comes to mind is when she crashed her car on the ice. She picked up Chinese on her way home from work and hit that icy intersection before they'd salted it. Norman nodded. Yeah, I remember that. But it wasn't serious, right? I shrugged. Just some bodywork and a minor bruise, but insurance covered everything. She was moody for a few days, but that's to be expected. Sometimes small things make people reevaluate their lives. Maybe it scared her more than you think. Are you saying she cheated on me because of a car accident? I don't know, but stranger things have happened. We still don't know if she's cheating. Norman jotted something down in his notebook. It's been a year and a half, then? I'm not sure. I didn't notice at first, but it's gotten worse in the past few months. She's barely speaking to me. Her business trips used to be months apart, but now they're just weeks. Sometimes it's only a week or two. Where does she go? Just around the Midwest, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, and Iowa. Only the big cities. That'll work. I've got a lot of contacts around there. We have a sort of network. A you scratch my back kind of deal. It cuts down on the legwork. A lot of people owe me favors. He shifted and pushed his jacket back, revealing a large black revolver. I had to start carrying because of one of those favors. Scanning hotel security footage is pretty straightforward. I stared at his desk. I hope I'm wrong. Yeah, me too. I already regretted dragging Norman into this. But over the next week, Ashley became even more distant. If we talked any less, we'd be completely silent. I didn't feel ignored, it felt more like she was watching me. Her next business trip was to Omaha, not exactly a hotbed of illicit activity. So, I was stunned when Norman called me to meet him at the diner a few days later. Jane seated us in the booth farthest from everyone, and Norman slid a series of photos across the table. I'm sorry, Lee. This is crap, but it looks like you were right. I stared at the photo of Ashley on top of a man in a hotel room. She left with him? I can't be sure where they went, but she didn't come back until 3 a.m. Well, that's messed up. Jane leaned in and studied the photo. This looks more like a random hookup at a hotel bar than anything serious. How the hell can you tell? Jane tilted her head and examined the picture. The way she's standing. She doesn't really know this guy, she's seeking him out. Norman nodded. Yeah, Jane's good at reading body language. That's why I have her watch people sometimes. Jane wrinkled her nose. I thought it was because of my short skirts and long legs, she said, casting a forlorn glance at the ceiling. I glanced between the two of them. You too, huh? Jane burst into laughter. No, no. Hell no. Norman sighed. God, please tell me you're joking. My arms still hurt every time the weather changes. Getting suddenly serious, Jane looked at the photos again. So, just a random fling, not a regular guy? Probably. Not that it makes a difference. Norman shrugged. I'll be in Omaha next week. I'll see if I can find the guy. Judging by the way he and the bartender look at each other, he's probably a regular, maybe local. Don't know what difference it makes, but I'll talk to him if I can. I couldn't see how anything the guy said would change my mind, but I didn't see a reason to tell Norman not to investigate. Well, let me know what you find. He nodded. It was probably just my imagination, but I felt both of their pitying stares as I left. Not that it mattered, I was already feeling sorry for myself, wondering how you even go about finding a divorce lawyer. A week and a half later, after a disheartening visit to an attorney, Norman called me up. Is Ashley around? No, she's not back until next week. I've got a bunch of stuff I want to talk about and show you, but I'm swamped with a personal injury lawsuit. I have to get pictures of a demolition site and then head to the airport. The guy with the supposed back injury is water skiing in Florida. It's a last-minute nightmare, but it'll be a couple of weeks before I get back, and I think you need to see this now. So, what is it? There's a folder on my desk with your name on it. Just grab it and meet me at the old Superfan demolition site. That's where the guy allegedly got hurt. I'll see you there. Oh, I almost forgot. 1 second, Norman said. I waited as he typed something on his phone. Okay, I've messaged Jane. She has a key and will meet you at my office. Couldn't she just leave the key? No, the office is about halfway between you two. It's easier if she meets you there. 15 minutes later, I pulled up to Norman's office, where an annoyed Jane, dressed in club clothes, was waiting impatiently. She handed me a large brown envelope. I'm going to be late for my date, she said. I glanced at her top and her ridiculously short skirt. Looks like a promising date for some lucky guy. If that skirt were any shorter, it'd be a belt. That's the idea. I even have a 6-piece body jewelry set. So let's get moving so I can get going. She locked the door and rushed down the stairs before I could thank her. I headed to my car and got in, wondering if any of this even mattered or if I was just using it all as an excuse to avoid filing for divorce. For a moment, I left the envelope on the passenger seat and started the engine, only for Jane to knock on the window. Hey, my car won't start. I don't have much time, but I can take a quick look. Don't bother. It's the alternator, she said, exasperated, as I raised an eyebrow. Yeah, I know. My mechanic said it was on its way out, but it was expensive, and I saw these shoes. Never mind. I just need a ride to the electric club. I can probably get a lift home tomorrow morning. You'll have to wait until I talk to Norman. He's heading to the airport soon, and I need to speak with him. Jane looked like she was going to argue but shrugged and got in, snatching up the envelope. It's worth waiting. I'll text him. We were halfway to GoLand when her phone lost service, and she started talking to me instead of messaging. What did Norman say he was doing out at the old lead mine? Personal injury claim. That town's been empty for years. I guess they're demolishing it or something. Jane began to eye the envelope. Did you get a chance to look at this? When would I have had the chance? I asked. She shot me a calculating look. Mind if I take a peek? I hesitated. No, not really. It's probably just the same stuff. She impatiently ripped open the envelope, pulled out a thick folder, and started flipping through it. This is all the phone and credit card info you gave him, along with some notes. But I can't read his handwriting. She tossed the folder back as I turned onto a nearly deserted road, passing warning signs. Suddenly, she sat up straight, her lips pursed and nose wrinkled. Norman's got files on about 20 guys in here. Seriously, when does he even sleep? She stared at it in confusion. This doesn't make any sense. What doesn't make sense? Maybe he mixed your stuff up with something else, she muttered, still baffled. Why are all these cases about missing people from the last year and a half? I glanced over. She shrugged and kept flipping through the folder. This guy here, Norman sent his picture from a cell phone 2 weeks ago. I could hear the hesitation in her voice. He's in a missing persons report from last week. We need to ask Norman what the hell's going on. You'll have to ask him in person, I've got no signal out here. She looked around at the desolate area, her expression uneasy. I don't like this. Almost there. Norman will give us some answers, and then I'll head back. I pulled up as the trees finally cleared, driving through an open gate and a tall fence marked construction zone. Keep out. We arrived at a long abandoned parking lot in front of the ruins of an old, empty school. A lone, rusting school bus sat in the middle, as if waiting for a post-apocalyptic Mad Max to show up. I spotted Norman's car near the entrance, next to a sign for Golan School. A giant concrete and rebar skeleton of the school's mascot loomed beside the building. I did a double take at the massive graffiti on it, "Go Honkers." Damn, that must have been one tough football season, Jane muttered distractedly. Could have been worse. My school mascot was a troll. I slowed down to park beside Norman's car. Just as I was about to say something, Jane motioned for me to be quiet. She frantically flipped through the folder. No, no, no. What the hell are you talking about? She thrust the folder into my hands. The photos, for God's sake, the photos. Her voice trembled as she struggled to speak. I flipped through them. There was nothing in common, different jobs, different cities, different guys. What am I missing? She caught her breath, then said in a near whisper, "Flip through it." She sounded like she was about to be sick. It reminded me of those flip books I used to doodle in the corners of my school notebooks, where you'd flip the pages, and a bird would fly, or a ball would bounce. As I flipped the pages, the images seemed to morph gradually. With every turn, the faces looked more and more familiar. The hair color, eye color, each victim looked increasingly like me. The last three were like staring into a mirror. Holy crap, I gasped, my breath coming in shaky gulps. Some of these guys were found dead. I rifled through the file. Words like unsolved and murder jumped out at me. This is messed up, Jane said, her voice cracking. I was thinking the same thing. Jesus Christ, I whispered like a prayer, struggling to comprehend. Ashley's coming back next week, right? Jane asked. Yeah. She can't be involved in this. We'll take it to the police. Then just leave, go somewhere, anywhere, Jane urged. I nodded, momentarily speechless. But if Norman has this, what the hell does he know? Jane slowly shook her head. It's got to be bad. Let's grab whatever Norman has for me and head back to town. In hindsight, going into the school was probably one of the worst decisions I've made. Just beyond the school office, where the ceiling had caved in entirely, there was an open classroom. I could see what looked like Norman slumped in a chair, covered in some kind of coat. Jane, still trailing behind me, was flipping through the files in the dim light. I stopped dead when I realized the coat was a blanket completely draped over the figure. Jane looked up from the file and stared in shock as I cautiously approached. The thick metallic smell of blood in the air was a clear sign that whatever was under the blanket was something we didn't want to see. Ignoring my better judgment, I reached out, grabbed the blanket, and pulled it slightly. It snagged for a moment before falling away. Jane stifled a scream, dropping a stack of files as she stumbled back against the wall. Norman was handcuffed to the chair, his clothes soaked in blood that dripped lazily into the puddle beneath him. His eyes were open and lifeless, and a cloth gag was stuffed in his mouth. A massive gash across his throat formed a grotesque second smile from ear to ear. I stated the obvious, okay, this is really bad. Jane nodded, her voice quivering. Time for a new plan. Yeah, new plan, run like hell. Too late, a voice cut through the air, shrill and manic. It was Ashley, but something was terribly wrong. The voice was high-pitched, almost whiny, and the worst part was that it was coming from the hallway right outside the classroom. Ashley slowly appeared, her head tilted forward at an odd angle, her hair nearly covering her face. A butcher's knife dangled from one hand, and a gun in the other. Jane jumped away from the wall, darting behind me, brushing against Norman's limp hand. Oh God. Ashley slowly raised her eyes to meet mine, her gaze unfocused and locked on me. Too late. Too late. Too late, she chanted in a strange, sing-song rhythm, making my skin crawl. She blinked and pointed the knife at me. You cheated. You weren't supposed to peek. That's not how we play this game. You'll ruin all the fun. Shit, Jane said, flinging the files at Ashley in a blizzard of paper. Run. She shoved me, and we bolted toward the side door of the classroom. A deafening gunshot rang out as we rounded the hallway corner, sprinting toward what looked like an emergency exit. We burst into the bright moonlight, nearly crashing into the rotting, apocalyptic goose sculpture as we dashed across the weed-choked parking lot. I glanced over my shoulder in terror. There was nothing where I'd expected Ashley to be, chasing us. The fire door hung open, the black void yawning empty. I slowed down, and Jane shot me a furious look. "What are you doing?" She stopped short when she saw what I was looking at. "Where is she?" "I thought she'd be chasing us." "Yeah, me too. Why would she just let us go? That's probably not good, right?" I looked around the abandoned lot, maybe a bit frantically. As far as I could see, Jane and I were alone, but the moonlight casting shadows through the trees made them so deep and dark it felt like we could be surrounded by an army of Ashleys. "I don't think so." We made our way back to the car. "Damn it," I muttered as soon as I saw the car. I knew we were screwed. The hood was open, and cables were hanging. It wasn't anything I couldn't fix if I had time, but I had a bad feeling that time wasn't on our side. "You didn't lock it?" Jane looked at me, incredulous. "Of course I did, but you know she has keys." "Sorry, I didn't think about it." Jane tried the handle on Norman's car door. Of course, it was locked. The main door of the school slowly creaked open. "This isn't fun," Ashley's voice chilled my blood. Without saying another word, Jane and I took off running toward the back of the school. Jane tripped as we rounded the corner, and I grabbed her hand to keep her from falling. "Watch it." Jane glared at me. "Easy for you to say. If I'd known this was going to happen, I wouldn't be dressed like the idiot who dies 5 minutes into a horror movie." "Seriously," she said, exasperated, "I would have at least worn running shoes. I would have laughed if I hadn't thought it would make us both collapse." Jane was doing what she always did when things got bad, cracking worse jokes. We pushed past a sign declaring that the rotting pile of boards and metal behind it was Golan's Greenhouse 4-H project, a better, greener America, and we started picking our way through. "Where are we going?" "Hell if I know. The last gas station was like 20 miles back." "Did you know she had a gun?" "I'm pretty sure that was Norman's gun," Jane said as she cautiously stepped over heaps of debris. Finally, we reached the other side of the greenhouse. Jane turned to say something when Ashley stepped out of the shadows of the building directly in front of us. She had just come back from the school, her voice taking on a strange, childlike tone. "You know, you're really bad at this game." Probably would have been harder for, Jane's words trailed off as she suddenly dashed to the right, her panic resembling a cry more than a sound. But Ashley cut me off, blocking my path. With no other choice, I spun around and sprinted back through the mess as fast as I could. A chilling laugh echoed in the darkness behind me. As I scrambled away from the ruins of the greenhouse, I spotted a partially open door. I ducked inside, pausing to let my eyes adjust. The darkness was nearly complete, interrupted only by streaks of white and silver moonlight seeping through gaps in the decaying ceiling. I carefully navigated the nightmare-like hallways, searching desperately for an exit. Collapsed ceilings and seemingly bottomless holes in the floor were everywhere. A bright square of moonlight pointed to an opening outside, but it was a dead end, blocked by heavy fencing I had no hope of getting through. I turned back. "No way out, is there?" The voice was strange, the emphasis offbeat and wrong. Ashley was watching me, amused, as I backed toward the lobby. I moved slowly, inching backward. "Look, Ashley." She stepped forward with deliberate slowness, brandishing the knife. The moon's silver light gleamed on the blade. I tried to say something else, but her blank, almost bewildered expression made it clear she wasn't hearing anything. The gun pointed at me convinced me there was no reasoning with her. I bolted down the nearest hallway, tripping over debris. I half expected a gunshot, but it never came. I fell hard but scrambled to my feet, glancing back in terror. Nothing, no movement, no sound, just eerie silence. I felt my way along the wall, trying to stay in the shadows as much as possible. Each step felt like an avalanche, my heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the sound of my own breathing. I reached for a doorframe, peeking around to find a giant, walled-off space filled with patches of light and darkness. It could have been a gym or a cafeteria, the roof was caved in, and the floor looked torn up. I moved from one support beam to the next, clinging to debris, focused entirely on each step. After nearly losing my grip and slipping off one of the beams, I paused to catch my breath. That's when I heard it, a low, soft laugh ahead of me. It took a moment to make out the movement in the darkness. Ashley was darting toward me, much faster than I could have imagined, practically leaping from beam to beam. Moonlight flashed on her knife as she moved. She stopped about 10 feet away, balanced on a fractured beam I wouldn't have dared touch. She seemed to be saying something, but it was more like a tuneless hum, notes out of sync and jumbled. "Ashley, let's talk about this." Something twitched in her face, like an insect crawling under her skin. "But that's not how it's done. You have to be quiet. We can't let anyone hear us, remember?" She lightly jumped onto the beam I was on, her face twisted into a macabre grin as she inched forward like a cat with a trapped mouse. And then it happened, I fell. The beam gave way beneath me, and Ashley plummeted almost silently into the darkness below, debris crashing down around her. I grabbed onto a heavy loop of wire, clinging to it with all my strength despite the sharp pain in my head from hitting a beam. I could make out one of her hands still clutching the knife, protruding from the rubble. It took every bit of effort I had, but I managed to reach the next beam, then the one after that. When I finally made it to the other side, I tried to look back, but the shadows had shifted with the moonlight, and I could no longer see her hand. Limping down the hallways, I eventually stumbled outside. Jane had been sure there was no way Ashley could have reached her before our encounter in the school. As I caught my breath, a figure staggered out from around the building's corner. I sighed in relief, thinking it was Jane. But then the figure stepped into the light, smiling madly. It was Ashley. I turned and sprinted toward the parking lot. Ashley chased me relentlessly as I dodged around the concrete mascot and ran toward the gravel-strewn parking lot. Just seconds later, I crashed face-first into the gravel, the weeds hiding the parking blocks. I began crawling alongside the rusting hulk of the school bus. "Get on the bus," a hissed order came, but it didn't sound like Ashley. With no other options left, I climbed the steps of the abandoned bus. Something slimy clung to my left hand. I found myself nose to nose with Jane, crouched in the main aisle. "What are you doing here? Why didn't you run? The whole place is surrounded by a big fence with barbed wire. The gates are shut. There's nowhere else to go. How is this any better?" I asked. Jane shrugged, her eyes wide with fear. "It's gotta be better than being out there with her, right?" A strange noise, like something dragging across the gravel, echoed near the front of the bus, making us both freeze. I nudged Jane toward the emergency exit, which was hanging slightly open. She paused, and I leaned forward to whisper in her ear. "If she starts coming in, sneak out the back." We crawled to the rear, Jane's short skirt distracting under other circumstances, but the flashing images of Norman's body kept me focused. A metallic scraping from somewhere near the front of the bus set my teeth on edge. "I know you're in there, you and your little whore," Ashley's voice taunted. Jane stiffened, glaring toward the sound. I motioned for her to stay quiet. A small insult was the least of our worries. There was a series of metallic thuds, each one growing closer and louder. "There's always some slut, isn't there?" Ashley's voice jeered, clearly aware of our location. I needed to buy time to think of a plan. "Ashley, you know I'd never do that. Jane's just trying to help." "We're worried about you," I said, trying to sound calm. A harsh laugh rang out, sharp as a jaybird's call. "Oh, sure. I've been watching you. That's how I knew about Rachel. I'm always watching. I know you haven't done anything yet, but you will. You always do." Her voice trailed off, only to return harsher and strangely childish. "Frank always does. Ashley, listen to." A shriek like tearing metal erupted from near the door. "Shut up. Shut up. I know who you are, Frank. I know." Jane's eyes widened in horror at Ashley's rant. Before either of us could respond, Ashley's head popped up from the bus door, her eyes entirely white and reflecting the moonlight, even as her hair hung down like Spanish moss. Her smile was too wide, too grotesque to be remotely human. A sound like broken glass tinkled across the floor as her knife swung toward us. "I see you," she whispered. "Go!" Jane slammed the back door hard enough to force it open, diving out and running. I sprinted after her, heading for the school building to take cover as a gunshot cracked behind me. Something struck my hip, sending me sprawling forward. I tried to keep moving, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. My foot snagged on another parking block, pitching me forward to the base of the half-crumbling concrete goose sculpture. I was oddly pleased not to have hit my head again until I realized my right hand was impaled on one of the rebar rods jutting from the sculpture's base. I pulled away, the sickening vibration of the bar running through my bones twisting my stomach. I retched as I rolled over, my legs refusing to function. A small voice in my head warned me that the hand and the bullet in my hip would hurt like hell later. A louder, harsher voice reminded me that there might not be a later. Ashley approached, dragging her feet through the gravel, muttering to herself a twisted lullaby of jumbled phrases, hums, and what sounded like bits of children's songs. She hesitated, almost as if she didn't recognize me. A deranged smile slowly crept across her face. "It breaks my heart to see you suffer so much, but I can fix it." Her expression darkened, the smile fading into a grim, humorless line. "I can always make you better." Her voice wavered, trembling. Ashley shook her head and slid the gun into the back pocket of her jeans. She raised the knife, watching the moonlight glint off the blade. "This is more fitting, don't you think? More intimate, after everything we've been through. I don't know why you won't just stay dead, Frank. Wouldn't that be easier?" "Hey, you!" Ashley's head snapped up, and I managed to follow her gaze. Jane stood in the doorway of the school, clearly terrified, but defiant despite her shaking voice. "Are you really gonna let that bitch get away? I've got all night to hunt you, Jane. This isn't about you. It's never been about the sluts, it's about him. It's about making this stop." "Jesus, you're insane," Jane said, half-stepping into the moonlight. Ashley moved erratically, glaring at her. "I said stop, Looney Tunes," Jane taunted, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Crazy and stupid, no wonder you can't keep a man." Ashley's face twisted with rage. "I said, stop. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, you're a nutcase." Jane stuck her tongue out mockingly. Maybe it was the insults, or maybe it was the tongue. Either way, I could almost hear something snap inside Ashley. She screamed incoherently, yanking the gun from her pocket and firing wildly at where Jane had been standing. I fumbled around, trying to grab something but only found loose stones. Just as the gun went off, I managed to get hold of a chunk of the sculpture about the size of a softball. Ashley's furious gaze darted from the now empty doorway back to me. She gripped her knife, muttering and growling under her breath as she moved closer. She raised the knife just as I threw the chunk of concrete at her foot. I couldn't escape, but maybe Jane could if I could slow Ashley down. Ashley let out a pained cry, jumping back and twisting, her foot slipping on loose bits of concrete. She fell backward, landing flat right beside me and suddenly went still. I tried to crawl away, but my legs still felt useless, and my impaled hand was screaming in pain. Ashley twitched, her right heel hitting the ground, but she didn't get up. Maybe she was stunned. Weakly, I dragged myself closer with my one good arm, not sure what I was going to do, but I knew I had to end this, to stop her somehow. If I didn't, she'd just keep killing. 3 steel bars protruded from the center of her chest. I couldn't tell if she could see me, her eyes were unfocused and glassy. She let out a sad, pained sound, and for a brief second, I could see the Ashley I knew and loved. I managed to slip my good arm under her head. She shuddered, and then it was over. The life left her, and all I was holding was a lifeless weight. I was weak and starting to fade, so maybe it was just a last breath trapped in her throat when her eyes finally went blank, but I was sure she whispered one last word, one word I strained to hear, "Daddy." 6 weeks later, I was finally ready to go home. I carefully settled into the passenger seat, my hip aching after traveling in coach class. "Yeah, thanks for picking me up," I said. Jane nodded, fiddling with the air conditioning for a moment. The bruises she'd had at Norman's funeral were nearly gone. "I figured you'd want some help getting home. I could have left your key at the service desk. That'd be depressing. Besides, your car still stinks. You need to replace the passenger seat, or it'll never smell right. You lost like a liter of blood in it while I was hauling you out of there." I sighed with regret. "Noted. It's still not quite the same. You still owe me for the skirt and top, you know." Jane scoffed. She'd used the only thing she had to stop the bleeding. "I'll buy you 5 of each, worth every penny. I got you into the ER first in line, half naked and all. Ended up with phone numbers from 3 paramedics, 2 nurses, and an anesthesiologist," she added with a satisfied grin. "I'm not surprised. Even as out of it as I was, I saw how much attention you were getting. They were slow getting me a hospital gown, though." Jane snorted. 3 of those phone numbers were from women, seriously. She made a dismissive wave. Hey, don't judge, it doubles my chances of a date on Friday night. We sat in silence for a long moment as she drove us out of the parking lot. You know, the police probably left your house a mess. It was already a mess. They tore it apart during the 4 days I was in the hospital, then searched it again after realizing Norman was probably right about her trips. It's a total wreck. How many guys do they think she killed? They're certain of at least 15 victims, but they're trying to tie her to every missing person in the region between 20 and 50 years old. Jane shivered. I heard they found all kinds of hidden cameras in her house. They even found a GPS tracker in my car and an app on my phone that sent all my messages and recorded all my calls. She was watching me the whole time. Jane shivered. Glad I never sent you any nudes. Almost did one night about a year and a half ago. I was drunk and wanted to show someone my piercings. Thought it was funny, but I sent them to the wrong number. My cousin Leanne still blushes when she talks to me. Jane shrugged. So, what did you find in Des Moines? Half of what she told me was a lie. Her parents died in a suspicious fire when she was 13. She spent a couple of years in a psych ward, but I couldn't get the records. That's not much for almost 5 weeks of digging. Norman was the pro at this, not me. But I think I found what I needed to know. What was it? Her stepdad's name wasn't Kid, like she told me. It was Frank, and there were allegations that he'd abused some young girls. I closed my eyes for a second. Jane stared at the road ahead. Yeah, but he died before they could charge him. So, you know. She kept her eyes on the road. He looked like you, didn't he? I nodded, feeling a sinking dread inside. Frank had looked almost exactly like me. We drove in silence for several minutes until we pulled up to my house, yellow police tape still haphazardly strung around the front door. Are you sure you're ready to go back in there? Jane asked, wrinkling her nose. Not really. I'm still having nightmares, but sooner or later, I have to go back. Where else am I supposed to go? Jane didn't restart the car. Then come stay at my place for a while. Jane, you don't have to. You're not the only one waking up in a cold sweat. I considered it for a second. Still got that old couch? Nope. Got a better one. Good, that thing was uncomfortable as hell. Jane started to say something but stopped. You know, it's gonna get better eventually. You'll get through this and find someone. You're not exactly batting 1,000, though. She tried not to laugh, but a chuckle burst out anyway. Seriously, you've got the worst taste in women. We need to find you a class or a manual or something. Maybe a companion guide or something. I don't think they make those, I said, shaking my head. We'll check Amazon, they have everything. She smiled as we pulled up in front of her apartment building. I sat there for a moment, but Jane hopped out and opened my door. Come on, let's get your stuff. I struggled out of the car, my hips still aching. Jane helped me up. I still can't believe she shot you in the ass. It was the hip. Tell yourself whatever you want. I had to stop the bleeding with all the clothes I was wearing. She got you right on the cheek. We limped up the stairs, and I waited as she pulled out her keys to unlock the door. The moment we stepped in, I saw 2 armchairs and a coffee table in front of the TV, but no couch. I thought you said you got a new sofa. I lied. You know I do that. This isn't really a good idea. Jane stepped closer, grabbing my hand. Let's be honest, we couldn't help each other with our messed up heads while you were out there, and I was in here, right? She dragged me 2 steps closer, clearly aiming for the bedroom. I may not be Mrs. Right, but I'm Miss Right here, right now. She let go of my hand just long enough to slip off her top and jeans in one swift, impossible move. Pausing, she stuck her tongue out playfully, showing off that her tongue piercing matched her other jewelry. My eyes were involuntarily drawn to her bubblegum pink panties, remembering the 6-piece body jewelry set she'd mentioned. Most impressive girl bounce in the history of bouncing girls, she joked. I couldn't help but smile. Later, when you're ready, I'll help you find the perfect Miss Right. She laughed melodiously. I swear I'll find you the best Mrs. Right there ever was. I tried to find the words to say how crazy that sounded, but she cut me off. Why don't we sleep on it tonight? I think by morning, you'll start seeing the light. Then she kissed me. There was something about that warm, cinnamon-spiced, carefree feeling that made me realize she was probably right.